This show is sponsored by Joel Ellenwood, aka The Infinite Zeal. You can find him on X, formerly known as Twitter, @_Infinite Zeal. He is probably the nicest dude you'll ever see on social media. He loathes the state just like the rest of us, but he has a proper way of doing it and bringing us some good laughs. We're going to meme our way through this, but please give him a follow on X @_Infinite Zeal. Thanks for the sponsor, Joel. Let's get to the show. Welcome to BudsnReality Show. I'm Sean Collins, the guy with a lot to say. And we got Ben DeJong back in the house. I said your name right this time.
Yes. Well, I mean, what's this? This is the fourth or fifth time. So
Like
if you mess up after this, I may be a little heartbroken, but we're on a good roll.
Well, I mean, like, yo, man, like the mess ups are partly not my fault because I was introduced to you as our friend Leah would say, Ben DeJong. You know what I mean? So, hey, Leah, how you doing?
Yeah, it's Leah's fault. It's fine.
It is
We can
Leah's
blame her.
fault. So, like, but no, you're Ben DeYoung, and I'm so glad to have you back. You know, you and I share the same brain when it comes to like, money, foreign policy, banking, econ, and I love that. And this is why you're like a repeat customer on this show because like we share these things. And since I've been back, I haven't done any shows about the economy or anything like that. I'm only two shows deep since my hiatus come back. And whoop, I'm banging my table over. But before we get into what we're supposed to talk about, I got a text earlier that really broke my heart. And it has to do with a show I did a couple weeks ago with Donnie the Don, actually Donnie the Misfit now, but formerly known as Donnie the Don, and Jeff Charles about Dexter Taylor. We did a show about his case and stuff like that, and come to find out that well, we pre-record, so today's Monday. What's the date?
13th.
Monday the 13th. Um, he's been sentenced to 10 years.
That's just absolutely insane. And as for the audience, we chatted because we could probably talk forever, camera on or camera off. So we've been chatting for the last 45 minutes, but just hearing that is, and I think so many times it's almost more one of those like we're going to make an example of this person, and that is just, it's disgusting. It's the, I can't remember what they called it back in the Soviet Union, like basically like a show trial
Right.
where the ruling was already set in stone. They just wanted to make it so horrible that no one would dare cross the state in this way again. And to me, that's what this is.
And go figure, it's the state of New York, the abomination of the United States. Like a lot of people say it's California. I think New York has surpassed California on the communism front. They have crossed the line into the other side. I'm not too sure there's any looking back at this point. There's so many factors that come into play. If you listen to the past show with Donnie and Jeff, you'll understand. But you know, this is coming to a state and a city and a town near you. Like this is just the beginning. And the fact that, well, let's put it out this way. Most criminals will say, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I don't belong here, blah, blah, blah. You know, Dexter Taylor really didn't do anything wrong. He built firearms in his home. He was ordering them online. He got tracked for it, but he wasn't building anything illegal. He wasn't, per se.
He wasn't selling it. He wasn't giving it away. It was
No,
for
nothing.
his own purpose. It's everything he built was stayed in his house.
And they came and they kidnapped him and put him in a cage, and now he's doing 10 years, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. So before we jump into the show, I'm going to say this. His judge's name is Abina Darka. Please flood her emails. Please, please, please flood her emails until she is miserable. And don't be assholes about it. Don't make threats. Don't be pricks. You know what I'm saying? But say your piece. Flood her emails until she's miserable.
Does he have like a GoFundMe or anything that
He
people
has
can
a Give
donate
Send
to?
Go. He does have a
Okay.
Give Send Go that is all over my X. And I put it on Facebook, but nobody sees my Meta stuff at all. They don't show it. The fact of the matter is there is a give, send, go for him. And there's also a petition to get her unbenched. It's out there. It's actually pinned to my ex profile right now at BudsnReality. So please go sign that. But yeah, I'm a little bit bummed out about that. I'm actually very bummed. I'm heartbroken.
I'm sure he'll appeal. I mean, it sucks the fact that he's going to be behind bars through the whole process, and they're going to, the state drags this stuff out, and their goal is to bankrupt you so you drop. They want to, because you can't outspend the state, and so I can see them trying to drag this on and make it so insufferable that he just runs out of money. Hence, like, I think that's important for anybody listening to be able to donate to somebody like that. I mean, that's like a huge cause, and I hope, if he does get out, like, he's out of New York. Like, there's so many other opportunities in other states. But then again, there may be extenuating circumstances why he wasn't able to move out of New York to begin with. But it's just the abuse of power in this scenario is disgusting.
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is his judge, Abina Darka. I'm going to keep saying that out loud, which is ABENADARKEH. Find her email, please flood it. Anyways, but she's the one who said that the Second Amendment wasn't welcome in her courtroom and that New York didn't believe in the Second Amendment. And I understand, like, there's maritime laws out there, right? And which protects judges like her, which is totally fucked up. Like, people don't understand maritime laws. Please look them up. I don't have enough time to get into the maritime laws. That could be like a whole different shows, but look them up.
Actually, Judge Andrew Napolitano talks about it a little bit because he was a judge in New Jersey and was also protected similarly. It's almost kind of like what is it when a teacher gets a certain status of seniority or years? Oh crap, why can't I remember that? But like teachers and professors, where you can't fire them.
Right. It's a protection order, pretty much. It's all it is a protection order. But this is going on through the states and they're protected by it. But the funny thing is no matter what, whether there's maritime laws or not, these judges still have to take an oath to uphold the United States Constitution and the law. So, like, where's the breaking point? What means what? I understand the 10th Amendment. So, like, the 10th Amendment pretty much states, like, the states can, run as they see fit. It's supposed to anyways. Like, it all depends on the state though, right? Some states abide by these things and some states are like, no, we have these laws that protect us. Whether you red, blue, whatever, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that we have a United States Constitution that somebody took an oath upon, that broke that oath and locked up an innocent man for 10 years. And that's absolutely heartbreaking. And it could happen to you. It could happen to me. It could happen to our friends, family, whoever it may be. Wow, I just made a rhyme. I'm a poet and I didn't even know it. But,
Dr. Zeus here.
I'm a big dork. But anyhow, let's not get into that too much because it's starting to bring me down and get me angry. So we are supposed to do a show about our wonderful financial system that is happening here in the United States. While we have, the people on TV saying everything is fine and the economy we're the best economy in the entire world right now, which actually is true, right? But considering that everybody else's economy is shit, we're just the best shitty economy right now.
Well, and that's something that I think that people don't quite understand because they look at the USA's GDP, our gross domestic product, and we're eking along, I think, at like 2.5%, and it's not in the negative. So that's one of those things where they're like, if we're in a recession, the GDP has to be on a negative basis on multiple quarters in a row. But then if you look in the GDP numbers, it's government spending that keeps our economy in the positive. And government spending it's It's not like they're creating any benefit. That's a tax on everyone to show that, I mean, it's falsifying the numbers is really what it is.
They're not
And even
creating
like,
wealth. Like anybody who believes that going into debt means creating wealth, let me be careful with my words. You're an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what to say. I'm like trying not to say the R word too much, the retard.
well, they're reading headlines. They're not doing a deep dive into the numbers because like jobs reports, every time they come out with a new jobs report number, it's celebrated. And then a week later, they revise the job report drastically lower. So they lie and then they tell the truth later and they bury it. And that's our economy is, it is all smoke and mirrors. It is, Oz behind the curtain. Like, don't look behind the curtain because
Yeah.
let's all just pretend that this is the great and powerful Oz and the United States is, it's there's nothing that can happen. That's, we're imputed, like the arrogance of so many Americans, especially, in our political class is just delusional. And I think that's light.
Well, the funny thing is, I took a hiatus for over a month and then all of a sudden shit hits the fan, right? I could have been doing all these shows about all these things. And I'm like, why did I take a hiatus right now? Because all this shit's happening. One of the shits that did happen during my hiatus was the interest of the national debt hit over $1 trillion, right? And our yearly GDP can't even cover that. We are not bringing in enough money into this country, which, by the way, the GDP, honestly, let's be real about the GDP. That is a bullshit piece of I guess information to keep people on their toes about the economy. It is a government, like, I don't want to say funded, it is a government fed piece of information that tells you whether or not we are doing good as a country. But the fact of the matter is, the country isn't even bringing in enough money to take care of the interest on the national debt at this point, and that's a scary situation to be in, considering, where we're at with inflation. You just said that inflation was about 2.5% right now. Which,
Well, I think right now official numbers is it may be like 3.5, I think. But we all know that's not the truth.
well, I mean, but the fact of the matter is they pull these numbers out of their ass and say this is a win where our inflation is at 2 or 3%, but everything has gone up 30%, actually 35% plus since 2020. So how can a 3% or 2.5% inflation be a win? That's my
Yeah,
question. And it's
people
not.
don't. But
That's
that's the thing is that shows you the deficiency in our government education system is they don't teach you. I mean, they want to teach you about trigonometry and math that like you'll never use. But are they going to teach you what compounded interest is? Oh no, they're not going to teach you about that because that's what inflation has been. I mean, we are now, to your point, I think since 2019, 2020, everything is 30% more expensive because of compounded interest. So yeah, we hit 9% official on inflation, I think in 2020, 21. No, 22, I think that's what it was by the end of the year. But then it's been going down since. And so the media is like, oh, it's been going down. It's not going down. It's just
oh,
not raising at the same rate, but it's not going down. It's just not as high as 9%. But that's 4% on top of the 9%, on top of the 5%. Like it's compounded interest, and people they don't understand, or I don't think I mean, that's the kind of stuff that they're not taught and on purpose. And I think Peter Schiff said it best, and I think he was quoting his dad when he said, when the government puts out CPI, the inflation data or the jobs data, it's the same as the mafia telling you the crime statistics. They have a vested interest in lying to you because they create it. So anybody who believes a government number from something the government created, I've got a bridge to sell you, a lake to sell you, a Michigan road to sell you, because it's fucking broken, and it's lies from the very beginning.
Well, it's crazy. And people, most normal people, I have a client right now that I'm working for. They're like, everything's so damn expensive right now. We don't understand why. And I was like, ping, there, the light bulb went off in my head. And I was like, well, I got to be professional about this right now because I am painting their house. And that's what I do in real life is paint houses. But I said, hey, let me break something down for you. And they're like, okay, I want to hear it. There's a husband and wife. They both wanted to hear me out. I said, look, I
It
said,
sounds like a Jehovah's Witness discussion. Like,
except I didn't have to knock on their door. I was already in,
Let me tell you about something.
I'm going to tell you a funny joke right now about Jehovah's Witnesses because I don't care. What's the difference?
You know a joke's good when you can't even
Oh,
tell
man.
it.
I got to make sure I got this right. How do you keep a Jehovah Witness off your porch? I think I already said it wrong. Shit. Never mind. Anyways, the joke is supposed to be, how do you deal with Jehovah Witnesses? And then you poke them in the chest and say, get off my porch. That's whatever. Anyways, gay. I know, horrible joke. I ruined it. But
I thought there was something about like burning a Watchtower magazine or something like that.
oh
But
no, actually, I remember now. Why are Jehovah Witness women flat chested? Get off my porch. I'm sorry, that was a terrible joke. Anyways, I don't want to make fun of too many religions. We already do that enough. But yo, I told these people, between 2020 and 2021, which was between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, 80% of the money that has been printed in the history of the United States. We're going all the way back to, the beginning of the Fed era, right? In 1913. 80% of the money ever printed was printed between 2020 and 2021. That is exactly why everything's so expensive right now.
I think, and people don't grasp I mean, they do grasp that the more of something is, the less valuable it becomes. And I think most people grasp that concept of if there's more of something, it's not as valuable. Because I mean, we know what like gold, silver, diamonds, like everybody kind of or at least grasps that concept. But when it comes to the US dollar, it's lost for some reason and I don't know if it's the propaganda of it's the business's fault. They're raising prices. Because I think that's the narrative, right? That's the cause of inflation.
Yeah, it's all about
It's
price
McDonald's.
gouging and greed and shit like that. And it has nothing
Right.
to do with that. Nothing.
I don't, again, coming back to government schools, they don't talk about real money. They talk about advanced math that you'll never use. And that's on purpose, obviously, because they don't want people to be able to figure out the scam. And economics, it's amazing. It's almost like medicine where they try to use as many big words and as a complicated hypothesis as possible to try to make people feel stupid or like, oh, this is so beyond you, you'll never understand it. But it's so basic. It's called supply and demand. If there's more supply than there is demand, the value of the supply goes down.
Right.
And vice versa. It's not complicated.
It's not, but nobody's ever taught that, They're taught supply and demand, but they're taught supply and demand on a Keynesian basis, which is another thing that we need to like remove from the American thinking. Like these Keynesian economics are destroying this country. Like let me just put it out there like this. And I think I might have said this earlier even. If your economic system is based off of debt, you will never be prosperous, ever. It will not happen. You will continuously be in debt. You will continuously be chasing the dragon. You're never going to get out,
Well,
ever.
and people need to understand that the fiat monetary system is exactly that.
It's Keynesian, yes.
It's based on debt.
Which Austrian economics, which both of you and I are both very well versed on, is based off of savings and assets, which is how you build wealth and how you build prosperity, right? You make good investments, you get a return on it. How are you going to ever get a return on anything when you're always in debt? You're not going to. You're going to accumulate interest and never dig yourself out of the hole. And which is what's happening to this country right now. Do you think this $35 trillion in debt, we're not quite there yet, but we're about there. Do you think this $35 trillion in debt's ever getting paid? Fuck no, it ain't ever. The
Well,
interest,
it will get paid in inflation because I think they realized, I think Ronald Reagan may have been the first president to be like, yeah, let's not raise taxes to pay for the debt. Let's print money to pay for the debt. And people don't understand that inflation is a tax.
it's the
It
worst tax.
devaluates your money.
Yes. It is the worst tax of all because it literally destroys, not only does it destroy the middle class, it kills the poor. Imagine poor people right now, the ones who are already living off of ramen noodles and spaghettios and whatever the hell else dollar menu, if that's even a thing anymore, they could live off of. Now they can't even afford that shit.
And,
You know,
and I think that's something that, again, I don't think a lot of people understand. And hopefully this isn't a surprise to your audience, but inflation benefits the rich because inflation makes assets go up when the dollar goes down. And so if you're already rich and you hold a lot of assets, realty, stocks, ownership of companies, precious metals is one of those that I think the common person can hold, but they don't because they don't understand that assets go up in inflation. And the rich love that. In inflation, rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And so even at the 2% target, that's kind of like the deception is you almost have to hand it to them because they're like, it's not enough to create a French Revolution where the rich are getting so much richer and the poor get. So let's just make sure the rich get richer at 2% a year and the poor get poorer at 2% a year, and maybe no one will notice. So it's such an ingenious scam of the bankers and the banking system of like that's a 4% spread.
right,
And that's not even like looking at the potential for deflation. So we've all seen television sets, right? I remember my first HD TV was a 420 projection panel, and I think I paid $1,200 for it, and it was a 40-inch. And now I can get a 60-inch with 1,000 times better technology and image quality for $300, right? So that's deflation. Is I get like my money goes further. I get to buy something better for less.
right.
And that is actively discouraged in the United States. And so even at a 2% inflation target, which originally was a ceiling and now it was a target and now it's an average because they keep on moving that goalpost
The funny
further.
thing is think about it, for all the middle class people, the working class people, and the poor people, you take hypothetically, if they kept it at a 2% inflation per year, which they have not, which the only proper percentage of inflation is zero, by the way. But anyways, you take a 2% and you do it by 10 years, now all of a sudden you're up by 20%.
Right, right. Well, and
This is
that's not in counting the potential for actually deflation. Because all the things that we could, if inflation was, if they stopped printing and inflation was at zero, can you imagine if everything in the United States was cheaper to buy, like a television, your
Right.
phones, your computers, your food, like everything could be cheaper, but because of innovation, because of technology, like we can do more with less. That's the beauty of capitalism, is constant innovation. We're trying, like capitalism is, I want to provide the most quality item at the cheapest price. That is the core of capitalism. I want to give you exactly what you want, if not better and cheaper than you are willing to actually pay for it. Like that's capitalism. And government and a central bank is working against that. They're saying we're going to devalue the currency so much that that mechanism of cheaper and better is nullified. We're going to steal that from everyone, because everyone would benefit if something was cheaper and better. But the government says we're going to steal that. And not only are we going to steal cheaper and better, we're going to make it more expensive by 2% a year. So we don't even know how cheap things could get if we didn't have a federal government, or at least a Federal Reserve.
Right.
And it's
Well,
just like that unknown. And again, people don't understand, like that's market economy. That's capitalism, is cheaper for better, higher quality, cheaper price. And government printing, Federal Reserve printing of money, eliminates that benefit of capitalism.
when you kind of hit the nail on the head too, where you brought up innovation, like innovation will always outcompete monopolies, always, without a doubt. But the problem is that there's so many, bills and laws and regulations on business. Innovation's almost obsolete because it's not allowed. And if you do invent something that is better than the status quo, mark my words, the government will find a way to take it from you. It
Well,
happens all the time.
that's the purpose of regulation. It's removal of competition,
Yes.
because the people who already have the product, they buy the politicians. And so as soon as they see a competitor coming into view, there's a new regulation to prevent that competition. And people think that regulation is all about, like, oh, it's just all about keeping me safe because the government's looking after me. And
Right.
it's no, the government's looking after, they're looking after the person who already has a monopoly on that product. They don't want competition. They're not looking out for your best interest. And they will say it's, I work in healthcare, and it is amazing the capture of regulations in healthcare, because the bigger healthcare entity doesn't want competition from a smaller person. And so, oh, you want to buy an MRI machine? You have to justify it to the government before you can buy it. And
Right.
and you know how costly that is to justify it to a government? It prevents. And so now I own the market on MRI, and now I can charge whatever I want. And that's what regulation is. People don't get it. That's one of the things, like, especially with Joe Rogan, like that drives me batshit crazy, is like he's a big pro regulation person. At least in a lot of the episodes that I've seen, because I think his dad, or he worked in construction, something like that. And he goes, well, without regulations, it would be an unsafe environment. It's like,
Right.
no, with regulations, it's not a free market. It's not capitalism. People need to understand that that's exactly what fascism is. It is what Mussolini enacted. It's what Hitler enacted. It is a handshake and an agreement between monopoly, corporate interest, and government. It is
Right.
a prevention of innovation. It is a status quo, and that's what we've been locked in. I honestly, I think we've been in a form of that since, the Federal Reserve was created. But I think that there was a lot of governments around the world that saw what Hitler did to Germany. And I think I think fascism works in a small scale, because he turned that country around from a third world where a dumpster of Deutschmarks couldn't buy a loaf of bread to a world power in 3 years. And I think there was a lot of governments that were like, oh, I want that.
Right.
Like, that prosperity and that level of control, Like, give me that. And I think that most governments around the world have been on a fascist bender since what they saw in Germany, because they were like, this is brilliant. It is power and control and money. And the issue with fascism is it may work in the short term, but it's not going to work in the long. I mean, $35 trillion in debt proves that fascism is not a sustainable kind of economy.
Oh, and it's definitely not, and it's getting worse by the day. And the only thing that's going to fix this is sound money and decentralization of money, decentralization of everything, really. Like, I am a very big advocate for separation of state and everything. But first things first, you separate the state from the money and you get some sound money back. Like, we need to get back on the gold standard immediately. And there's been too many like receipts to prove what I just said. Like, right now, as we speak, gold has outperformed the stock market over the past couple few months. I believe we're about 3 months now where gold has been outperforming the stock market. Gold is up 20% in just a couple months. How's the dollar doing? It's not.
And
It's not doing it
people,
all.
and that's the thing, is I don't think people understand that there's a clear link between the dollar and gold. And there's a reason why the government wants to suppress the price of gold. Because if gold explodes, it's a signal that the dollar is dying. And so that's I think that's what is a you have foreign banks. I mean, Russia, China, India, they're buying gold at levels over the past 3 years. It's unprecedented how much they're buying gold. And I think it's not, is it just a couple months where the next big BRICS meeting is, where there is a lot of hype around that they may actually present a medium of exchange between countries that is based at least partially on gold and silver, but it's probably going to be a basket of hard commodities, which is going to be wheat, rice, oil, silver, like real tangible
Copper, all of
things.
yeah.
Right. All of those things like platinum, cobalt, all of those, and so when they trade between the two, this currency will have physical items backing it. And so it eliminates that distrust of my central bank in China versus your central bank in India. I don't trust how many pieces of paper you're printing. And so trading something with you and getting your paper in return I don't trust it, right? Because I don't know how much you're printing. And so this levels that playing field for BRICS to say, here is the currency and here is what it's backed by. So if you're a country that belongs to the BRICS alliance, you have to prove to the other alliances, all the other countries, that when I trade something and I'm getting paid in this currency, I have physical assets to back it up.
Right.
Do you know? I mean, again, I'm not asking you, I'm asking the audience. Do you know what that's going to do to the dollar? How many of these countries are holding dollars, US treasuries, and US bonds as their quote unquote asset? And that's not an asset, it's a promise to pay, it's debt. Because that's all America is. It's a debt economy. We function on debt, we live on debt. Debt's everything. How fast are they going to get rid of that debt if they can trade in a currency that's backed up by physical assets? Like, I mean, you want to see inflation when all those dollars come back to the United States because they don't want it anymore?
Right. No, I totally get
Buckle
that.
up.
And actually, I had to look it up real quick so I got the name right. Gold Telegraph has actually been a wealth of good information on the gold train right now and what's actually going on. And
On X, right?
what was that?
On X.
Yeah, on X at Gold Telegraph _ is their handle. They're a very credible source. I have multiple people who get into that or whatever. But anyways, they have been a wealth of information on what you just kind of brought up. China and Russia are actually, as we speak, accumulating copious amounts of gold. And we're talking a lot. Now, one thing that one people or some people don't get is that, and I kind of learned this watching Redacted, Clayton Morris show. He
Great
had
show.
economists on there talking about gold and whatever. And I can't remember the economist's name or the banker's name or whoever he was at the time. It's been a while since I watched it. Um, when China and Russia are accumulating copious amounts of gold, it usually means the interest rates are about to go back up. It's almost foolproof. It's almost like that's the way it goes. Like if interest rates are going up, China and Russia are buying gold. They've been buying copious amounts of gold. And while there's been talks about the US or the Federal Reserve, I should say, lowering interest rates, that's virtually impossible because if they do lower interest rates at this point, we're going to see a hyperinflation and they can't have that. Like that would create, imagine, what we're going through right now and they pop off a hyperinflation, you would see some civil unrest, I think, because people won't, we already can't afford to live as it is. And you're going to create another hyperinflation on top of it. They know better. And I think they know that. And so what they're going to do is either keep them level where they're at right now. They're not lowering them anytime soon. It's not going to happen. But historically speaking, the way that these other countries are buying up gold, we might see another interest rate hike, which is totally going to screw even more people. People are trying to buy houses, cars, whatever it may be. If you have to buy something on credit, you're fucked. Period. And also they've also reported, oh, and this is another thing right now, which is insane to me, that the United States is actively trying to bully China off the global monetization system. Now, for those people who don't understand what that means exactly,
It's basically the SWIFT system, right? Because
yes,
that's what they cut Russia off of.
yes, they're literally trying to bully China out of the global monetization system. Now, this is where it gets juicy though. China actually owns over $750 billion of the United States debt. Look it up anywhere. You can find it. I think I found that on investors.com maybe, or invest.com. I can't remember at this point, but dude,
Granted, they have been reducing that pretty drastically, like year over year. Like they're not buying US bonds and treasuries at the rate they once were. So I don't know if they've been a net seller, but they're not buying it anymore.
which I do understand, but like at the end of the day, let's just put it out there like this. Oh, and let me throw this in there too, because this is another gold telegraph thing. Russia has sanctioned JP Morgan on freezing $500 billion. So, okay,
But
let's
that's
just,
in response, because I think that the European Union basically stole over $4 trillion of Russian assets. So Russia was basically saying, all right, if you're going to steal our money, we're going to steal your money. But it's nowhere near what Europe stole from them on our behest.
well, check this out. Who is JP Morgan? Who has ever read Creature of Jekyll Island? Who is JP Morgan? Well, I'm
Like
going to
that should be a mandatory reading for anyone who is even curious about economics.
absolutely. Dude, so Russia has just put a sanction on the Federal Reserve because JP Morgan is one of the founders of the Federal Reserve. JP Morgan was one of the people who went to Jekyll Island with the other 6 bankers, right? With the Rothschilds and everybody else. There are 7 of them. Okay. So he's literally sanctioning the Federal Reserve. What does the Federal Reserve fund on both fronts every single time that's happening? And
War.
by the way, how does every war start? Through financial sanctions. We are playing a game right now. I shouldn't say we aren't playing a game. The United States government, along with the Russian government, along with the Chinese government, they're literally begging for war right now. Russia just went after the Federal Reserve. Do you think the Federal Reserve's not going to do anything about it?
Well, especially with BRICS, because this has been tried multiple times. Gaddafi tried this with a gold-backed currency in Africa. He
Yes.
wanted a currency that all African nations could trade between themselves that didn't involve the dollar, and he was killed for it. That's been happening for years. But this is the first time that you've got countries like China and Russia, nuclear powers, superpowers, that are saying, we're going to do what Gaddafi wanted, and you're not going to stop us because we're not Gaddafi. We are a nuclear superpower. And so, I mean, there's no way the US gets around this, right? I mean, unless you want a world war and a nuclear holocaust, and not to say that there aren't some like the Lindsey Grahams who would gladly see that happen, because he's got a bomb shelter and he doesn't have any kids in the war. So he would be more than happy to profit from that nuclear holocaust. I mean, there are some insane individuals. Isn't that crazy that like Lindsey Graham is more insane than like a Kim Jong-il? I just like that's the people that are running our country.
I think Lindsey Graham is more insane than Putin.
Oh, 100%.
Lindsey Graham is Satan's spawn. He really is. This man wants war more than anything, but that's because he's got, Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and all those people in his pocket, just like Nikki Haley did. Think about it. Follow the money. Always follow the money. I've been talking about the Greek for a long time on my show. Pretty much the whole time I've been on this show doing this, I've been talking about the Greek, and I hope to get him on someday because he's a wealth of information on this stuff. And he's the one who always, back in the day during the Obama administration, when I was bitching about it, he's like, dude, just follow the money. You follow the money and you're going to get your answers. Every single answer is in the money.
Who
And
stands to profit? Who stands to profit? Who stands to profit? That's who's making the decisions.
Well, we have the United States government, playing games right now with China, and they're playing games right now. Not only are they trying to threaten China to bully them out of the financial system, they're literally funding Taiwan and giving them weapons, poking the bear, saying, "Hey, come and get us." They want to default on the loans without defaulting on the loans is what they're trying to do right now.
It's Ukraine 2.0.
Yes. Now, mind you, look what happened back in the day when we were giving Saddam Hussein back in the 80s, copious amounts of money and weapons to fight Iran. Meanwhile, Israel was covering the Iran side of that war. Crazy, right? And now they're funding Ukraine the way they are. By the way, we went to war with Iraq. So you can rest assured, mark my words, the United States will be going to war with Ukraine within 5 years. Because that's the way they play their games. This has been happening for decades now.
Well, I think that's a brilliant Dave Smith quote is, do you want to know who our enemies are going to be in 5 years? Look at who we're funding today.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and that's, people will look at us like we're crazy when we say things like that. But please, let's talk about this in 5 years. And I guarantee you, we're going to be at war with Ukraine. If we're even still here, who knows? The nukes might go off by then. I don't want to be an alarmist right now, but at the rate we're going, how many wars can you play in without there being blowback on your own turf when you don't have the military to back your shit up? The United States does not have the military to back up what they're doing right now. They don't.
Well, and this is what we saw in the end of the Roman Empire, right? I mean, they ran out of military because their empire was so stretched thin. And so they started bringing in mercenaries and paying them with devalued money. And now those mercenaries destroyed Rome.
Yes.
And we're looking at the same thing now, is there's bills being passed or at least being presented that all of the path to citizenship of all these, immigrants is 4 years served in the US military.
Right.
Like, that's Rome. Like, we know how that's what's so crazy to me is we know how the story ends, right? Because I mean, there is that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. But in some ways it does repeat. And it's the idiots who don't study history that repeat it. And
Well,
that's what that's exactly what we're doing.
that's the one line I like to use all the time is the one thing we've learned from history is that we don't learn from history. This show's been brought to you by Anarchy Wear. They are a great organization who sells clothing, banners like what's behind me, hats, all kinds of stuff. And they're absolutely amazing. Not only do they put out awesome content, they also make awesome things like this. And if you're a Spooner fan, you have this. Let me stand up. I didn't sign shit. Lysander Spooner. If you're a Spooner fan, you'll totally understand. If you're not a Spooner fan, get in my DMs and I'll let you know because he's one of the greatest to ever do it. This flag behind me, enemy of the state. Man, that's Murray Rothbard, the greatest to ever do it. I'm a Rothbardian. He is my favorite economist. He is my favorite anarchist, libertarian, whatever you want to call him. Fantastic material that he's put out. I highly recommend you read his books, but Anarchy Wear has everything from bold to cute and modest. You know what I mean? So like check them out at Anarchy Wear on X, aka Twitter. At anarchywear.ca on anything meta being Facebook and or Instagram. They're awesome. I love those guys. They're doing great things. And I highly recommend you follow them and get some goods from them, man. I love everything I have from these guys and they're amazing. And let me throw this in for you. If you use promo code BudsnReality, Buds, letter N, reality. I know you know how to spell. If you're watching this show, you're pretty smart. I know you are. Anyways, get at them, get yourself some gear. And if you use the promo code BudsnReality, you will get yourself 15% off. Who doesn't like a deal? So get at them, check them out. They are great, awesome people. Thank you for the sponsor. And let's get on with the show. We don't learn anything. This shit has been a vicious cycle since the beginning of time. This shit goes back to the biblical days. You know, this is just, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. What's been will always be, you know, what's been done, you know, will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes 1:9. There's my Bible verse for the show. And I might have got that a little reversed, but the same, you know, the message is there. Like this goes back to the very beginning. You know, the Roman Empire died because of what you just said, along with, you know, the devaluation of dollar, endless war, you know, stuff like that. Like, and here we are. It's eerily familiar. Like the Roman Empire falling is eerily familiar what's happening here. And this is why, like, I have been so adamant about people protecting themselves. Get weapons, get ammo, and get yourself some chickens so you can feed your family and have a ways of exchange. Grow a garden to, you know, get some money and have a ways of exchange. Also, you know, get gold and silver to have something that builds value other than a dollar that devalues. Like, think about it, dude. We both graduated in the 90s. A McDonald's value meal was $2.99, right? You could go out with your girl, get you some Mickey D's and go hit a flick and it might cost you $20, right?
On an expensive night.
Can you imagine, dude? I literally went to McDonald's for breakfast a couple weeks ago and got 2 sausage muffins without egg, 2 sausage muffins and 2 hash browns, and it was $14.
Yeah, I got a value meal at Burger King. It was 18 or 16. And I was like,
The other day,
value,
$6.
value, like that's just, I mean, I'm lucky to be able to afford that. But can you imagine the people who have been living off of McDonald's because that's all they've been able to afford?
Hey,
They can't go to a sit down restaurant and order anything. All they can do is, hey, here's my family, and all I can provide is a trip to McDonald's. Like, that's the highlight of the week. They can't afford that anymore. And that's the thing is like, that's not McDonald's. People don't, I mean, the government loves to try to pretend that's McDonald's. It's
It's
price gouging.
greedflation, it's price jacking or hiking or whatever it may be. They're the ones who are price gouging. When you have price regulations run by the United States government, they're the ones who are controlling the prices, right? I mean,
But
like,
but that's the point is McDonald's in a capitalist society, they want to provide the most quality at the lowest price. That should be any corporation's goal. So if they're raising the price and lowering the quality, that goes against their basic charter as a corporation. And so why would they do that? Right? We have to look at the why. We can't look at the cause. It's like in healthcare, are you going to treat the disease or the symptoms of the disease, or are you going to treat the disease? The disease is the Federal Reserve. They're just printing trillions on a regular basis. That's the disease. But the government doesn't want to treat the disease because they're benefiting from it. They want to talk about the symptoms, and the symptoms is higher value menu at McDonald's. That's not, and it's crazy because even in healthcare, you're kind of seeing that, right? Like, I don't remember the last time a disease was cured in healthcare because there's no profit in curing a disease. There's profit in disease maintenance. Take a pill every day and it won't kill you, but you're not going to get better. There's profit. And that's not it's not the fault of the pharmaceutical company, because they should be wanting to provide the highest quality at the lowest price.
yeah, but they have all kinds of regulations and shit they can't do too.
But they partnered with the government and the FDA. So now they don't have to provide a high quality product at a low price. They can provide a shitty product at a stupid price. But that goes against market functions, right? Like if I'm selling you a teddy bear and you have a pet rock, I'm going to get the best pet rock I can for my teddy bear when we make that exchange. That's capitalism. Is I want the best for what I'm providing. And we don't have like, that's what, drives me nuts, even with like the Jimmy Dores of the world is, they talk about this is the fault of capitalism. This is the end result of capitalism. Capitalism is greed. No, we left capitalism 100 years ago when the Federal Reserve was created, and even potentially before, because of government regulations. But once they take over the means of exchange, you've totally left capitalism, because capitalism is two individuals that agree upon a medium exchange that they
Who
both agree
mutually
upon.
benefit.
Right. They both, right. I'm
Yes.
like, if I go to work tomorrow and I want to be paid in gold, that's capitalism. My employer says, I will pay you in gold at this rate, and I say as an employee, I accept that exchange. Now I have to be paid in dollars. That is a rule. That's not capitalism.
That's right.
And people, I wish more people understood what capitalism is and what it is not, and where we are living today. It is the furthest from capitalism you could even imagine.
Well, I mean, I would call it socialism. Some will call it cronyism. It's one of the same, this is,
I call it fascism,
and it
because
is,
it benefits the corporation and the government.
and that's another word, that's, fascism, capitalism, liberal, anarchy. What else? These are all words that they have bastardized throughout the years and the meanings to them.
Well, I would actually challenge your audience to go try to do some research on what a fascistic government looks like. It's almost impossible to find out like how Germany was structured or Italy was structured under fascism. It is almost, I have tried deep diving on multiple search engines. And it's almost impossible to find out how those governments were structured, because it's what we live under. And they want to equate fascism with Nazism. And that's not. Nazism is an ideology. Fascism is a structure of government. They are not the same. And there's a reason why they don't want you to know. I mean, you can find out what communism is, but I dare anyone listening to this podcast, go try to find out what does the structure of a fascistic government look like. You're not going to be able to find it because they don't want you to know.
Right. Right. But I will tell you this, it's exactly what this government looks like today. And it's both the Republicans and the Democrats doing it. You know, it's not just one side or the other. And I'm sure there might be, you know, some decent blue dog Democrats in the world, if there's any of those left, you know, and I'm sure there's some, you know, decent OG Republicans in the world who are still trying to get out there or whatever, but they're being overshadowed by the fascist Republicans and Democrats who are trying to force ideologies and rules and regulations upon your life that shouldn't be there in the first place. Like, there should be no regulations on the market. There should be no regulations on self-defense. There should be no regulations on peaceful people. As long as somebody is not hurting somebody, taking their stuff, or violating private property, it doesn't matter what they're doing or how they're making money or how they're living their life, because they're not doing anything wrong. Period. You know, and that's when my hardcore anarchist is going to come out. Like, nobody has the right to tell you how you can make money as long as you're not doing those things I just listed. Nobody has the right to tell you how to live their life as long as you're not doing those things that I listed. Nobody has the right to tell you how you can be or where you can work or anything like that, as long as you're not violating private property, hurting somebody, or taking their stuff. And that's where anarchism comes into play. And that's even where even libertarians come into play. Like, libertarians and anarchists are not that far off. They're really not. One just believes in no government at all, and the other believes in some minimal government.
Well, minimal government that is that everybody agrees to. It's not being imposed on anyone. Because I think we've had this discussion before about the negative annotations of anarchy. Is so many people think anarchy is no rules, no law, no government, Mad Max.
Yeah.
That's what they believe anarchy is. And anarchism is a voluntarist society. That's it. Like, and people don't, and that's where I don't label myself as an anarchist. I label myself as a voluntarist. In reality, they're the same thing, but there's such a negative and like connotation with anarchism. I just had this conversation with somebody that, you know, represents a group that's trying to push for free and fair elections. And they were hoping to, you know, kind of link in with the Libertarian Party of Michigan, but then once they saw some of the viewpoints of anarchy or anarcho-capitalism, they're like, that's fringe, or that's not something that we believe in. And my pushback was, do you know what that is? Right.
Right.
That most people don't. They don't
because
understand. It's
they think,
voluntarism. It's just people agreeing to the rules they're being subjected to.
which there aren't many. It's literally, don't hurt anybody, don't take their stuff, and don't violate private property. That's it. Like that. And that's the libertarian rule too. It's not any different from ANCAP when it comes to that. You know, and even in a libertarian society, you can go along and be an anarchist in your own little area. The libertarians aren't going to bother you because you're not going to be hurting anybody or taking their stuff or violating private property. That's the beautiful thing about libertarianism. And that's why I stick with it as much as possible. I'm no longer a part of the state party or the national party. I will not be renewing my membership for multiple reasons, you know, but I still want to move forward and be an activist and push liberty forward and work with people like you or anybody else who's trying to, you know, push liberty forward. Just because I don't agree with LP politics right now means nothing. There's plenty of libertarians who want to push liberty forward, and not deal with the caucus war bullshit and whatever else is going on right now. Like, I just can't do it. I got to protect my peace, you
Right.
know.
And for those who are listening, I am a member of the Libertarian Party of Michigan. I am the communications director. I am a chair of the Lansing affiliate. And but I'm not, my goal is not to change. I mean, the whole pledge of providing what is a free world in my lifetime, like that's not my goal. My goal is to say no to centralized authority. And so nullification is why I got involved in the Libertarian Party. I want counties, villages, townships to say, no, we're not going to enforce that. No, we're not going to abide by that. No, we are not going to prosecute that. We are standing up for our citizens in our village, in our township, in our city. And that's my hope. And that's why I am a member of the party in Michigan. Is that should be the driving force. Yes, unfortunately there's a lot of authoritarians in the state party. There are a lot of people in the state party who they're looking for a social club, for attention, for pats on the back, for awards for being the best loser. Like that's out there. That's out there. And
I'm sure.
I'm not about that. I want to actually make an impact. And um that's a detriment, I think, for the Libertarian Party in general. There's a lot of individuals who just want the status quo. They just want to be the third party. Um they just want things the way that they've always been done. There's a lot of people that resist change. And I work in healthcare, and I that's all I do is change management and process improvement. And so I'm always introducing change. And I understand that hesitance of like, no, 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 don't change anything. I like the way things are going. And we don't have that choice anymore in our government structure, in our politics, in our lives. We can't keep on doing the same thing. We have to be radical. We have to do something different. We have to push back. We can't just be the third biggest party in the United States. We have to be disruptors.
I am actually in the middle of building coalitions with some GOP members right now. I know, sorry guys. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, and I'm sure if there were, like leftist, I'm sure you would be more than
If
willing to
there's
partner
any
with them
blue dog
too.
Democrats out there, if you believe in ending the wars and ending the Fed and ending the empire, I want to talk to you. That's my thing. These are my three big things that I want to deal with: is end the Fed, end the wars, and the empire. And whether you're a libertarian or an independent or a blue dog Democrat or a liberty-minded, GOP member, I want to work with you. I'm not going to pigeonhole myself into this shit anymore, because the radical left has taken over. And we need all the help we can get, dude. Honestly, like, I get goosebumps saying this, because it's hard for me to say that, but I've learned so much over the past 2 years that we need to build coalitions to weed the bad people out. And then after we get the bad people out, let us handle the rest. We can deal with the things we don't agree on after that. Okay. But right now, we need to get the fascist, communist, dictators out of here. The ones who are trying to control every aspect of your life, we need to get them the hell out of here. This is
It's authoritarianism versus the rest of us.
right.
It's us versus them. That they like it is the neocons on the left and the right. And there's unfortunately there's not a lot left that kind of don't fit in that category. I mean, it's amazing even on the right, how many good Republicans like is it Mike Lee? who's so good on so many things, and then he is just like kill all the Palestinians. And it's like you just want to pull your hair out and be like, you're so good on so much.
And then you do that.
Then, but you're clearly so captured by by somebody who's paying you a lot of money to say that, because I guarantee you don't believe it because you're so good on all the other wars, right? Like clearly there's a benefit for you for pushing genocide. And it just, and I applaud your litmus test. If you're anti-war, if you're anti-centralized monetary system, like that's the root of all evil. And I think I know we both agree on that.
Right.
Is as a Federal Reserve that has a monopoly on printing money, you solve that, you've solved everything else.
Seriously. 100%, and it's not that, I'm sure I'll get a bunch of people, oh, you're just giving up and you're throwing in the towel, or you're just caving to these authoritarians. No, I'm not. This is not it at all. This is a plea to the rest of my fellow anarchists and ANCAPs and libertarians or whatever you may be, is like, yo, why don't we start working on the things that we agree on with people rather than the things we disagree on? Once we can figure out how to work together on the things we do agree on, I genuinely think the things we disagree on will just kind of work itself out. And if it doesn't work itself out, well, we'll debate our way out of it, because I will tell you what, I would take, an anarchist or a libertarian or an ANCAP, whatever you call yourself, in a debate over any statist any day of the week and twice on Sunday. It'll be a bloodbath in that debate. And you'll really see, and people will really see, the value in our beliefs and stuff like that. But right now, we just need to get back to some sort of normalcy. And
Well,
it's
divide and conquer is the oldest term in military. Divide and conquer, divide and conquer. And that's what you turn on any major news, and that's what you're going to get: division. And there's a reason for that, because as long as you're fighting between each other, you're not fighting against the state. And that there's a clear purpose to that, is just exactly that: keep people divided, keep people talking about, like, that was one of the greatest coups in 2008 was Occupy Wall Street. It was huge, was like, fuck the banks, and eventually that would have been like, fuck the Federal Reserve. But man, all of a sudden they hammered racism.
right.
And that became like the new ism. And it immediately divided people. And people stopped talking about the bailouts. They
Right.
started fighting between themselves about racism. And I mean, it's a brilliant strategy, but that's exactly what divide and conquer is.
They know what they're doing. So, like, here's the thing. Like, we all think the state's a bunch of idiots, and they are. They're a bunch of retards, whatever. Oh, I said the R word, shit. But anyways, they're a lot smarter than we give them credit for. They know exactly what they're doing. They have a lot of people in their ear to tell them how to do it. There's nothing new under the sun.
And maybe it's not the Joe Bidens. I mean, there are plenty of state actors that are just puppets, right? They're not the brilliant people, but it's the people pulling their strings that have a plan. They know what they're doing. And that's why they love the Joe Biden. I mean, he's basically a corpse, and that's perfect for them.
Which and you got that right. But also, like, you go back to Trump in his administration, like, somebody came at me because I'm like, all elections are rigged. They have been for decades. And they asked me straight up, do you think 2016 was rigged? And I said, absolutely. There was no reason that Donald Trump should have won that election. On paper, he was going to get blown out, honestly. But because Donald Trump is the Federal Reserve's wet dream, he really was. The guy put a $7.8 trillion in debt. He spent more money than any president ever in 4 years. He was the Federal Reserve's wet dream. So of course he was put into place. They knew exactly what they were doing.
Well, and the thing is, I think he proved that he wasn't the war machine's wet dream. And so I think that was the we got to stop him at all costs, because he may check all the other boxes of a perfect politician, but he wasn't the war machine. I mean, even that is giving him probably too much credit, because he's the one who was sold all of those missiles to Ukraine that started this
Well, he
conflict.
escalated Yemen and Syria. So the funny, here's where I'll give Trump a little bit of credit, because I despise that man. I hate Donald Trump. I actually think he Trump gives me some hardcore Hitler vibes. He really does. And I don't have enough time to get into that. But there's been plenty of instances where like I'm like, wow, dude, he's got some serious dictator vibes to him. You know, one
It's
one
it's
one
all very ego driven.
well, one in particular, one instance in particular, I will say is when, there was a heckler at one of his events, and he's like, "Have that man arrested, get him out of here," right? Well, Obama kind of had the same situation happen to him during his administration. And instead of saying, "Hey, man, get this guy out of here, have him arrested," Obama was like, "Let him speak. Let's hear this guy out." And
Yeah, Vivek did that a few
Vivek did that
times.
too. He took a play out of Obama's book, which Vivek took a lot of plays out of Obama's book, looking back and you kind of see it or whatever. But, the fact of the matter is we need to, not only as liberty minded people, start working with people on things we agree on rather than fighting the things we disagree on. We need to do that across the board, whether it be, the OG Dems, because I know there's some OG Dems out there. Like I had a great conversation with my mom, yesterday. And she's a Democrat. She always will be, but she is like, "Hey, I don't like it when these people are shoving this in our face. And I don't want them to take the guns away. I think there should be some laws, and we disagree on that." But she's like, "I don't want them to take the guns away. I don't want, the LGBTQ people, sorry, mom, throwing their stuff in our face. Like, live your life and leave us alone." And that's where she's at, because my mom's an OG Dem. You know what I mean? She doesn't like all this shit, but
A
she's
true
never going to
liberal.
vote Republican. She's never going to vote Republican. And people like me are just a little bit too radical for her, and I understand that. That's fine. But like, we have to work on things we agree on more than we fight over things we disagree on. This is the problem within the Libertarian Party right now, is that they're more focused on the things they disagree on more than the things they do agree on. Like I've always been the outsider looking in, I'm not a caucus guy. I'm never going to join a caucus. Just because I truly believe that caucuses are damaging to the actual cause in itself, because it turns into my club's better than your club.
Right. It's a dividing mechanism. And that's why I am not a part of a caucus either.
And it to see the Project Liberal people and the Mises Caucus people go back and forth, which I really made a funny tweet about that. I'm like, do you think the Project Liberal people and the Mises Caucus people will be holding hands singing Kumbaya at convention? You know what I mean? I just did it to be funny, because like, look, guys, if you really want this to work, you're gonna have to stop fighting amongst yourselves, period. And that's my plea to Michigan too. I've already, I've wasted 2 podcasts on this, the Michigan stuff. And I say wasted because it was a waste. It really was, because nobody was, willing to compromise or meet in the middle. It was a waste.
Well, except for me.
You
I'll
know,
carve that out.
you
I really wanted to talk to some people on the other side of the aisle. But it's so much about ideology, and it's just kind of it sucks that politics is even infected. I mean, granted, it is a political organization in the end, right? The Libertarian Party is a political organization. So the idea that politics would affect and infect the Libertarian Party, it shouldn't be shocking. But to your point is even the most extreme libertarian on each side of the aisle probably agrees 90%
Right.
on policy, but they're so laser focused on that 10% where they disagree. And that's where it kind of, drives me nuts on this whole, like, it's perfection or my view of perfection or die. And it gets us nowhere. And to your point earlier about like creating coalitions with all political parties and all viewpoints, but focusing on where we agree and making that like the focus. And that's where we can align on and where we can push things forward. And that's where, especially, going back to kind of the topic of the conversation today is the Federal Reserve and money. I mean, if we can agree on that, even if that's just 10% of our viewpoints that we agree on, I know that will change. Even if I don't agree with all of your other stuff, like full-term abortion, like so many of the other stuff we probably disagree with on on a lot of topics with others, whether it's left or right. But if you can solve or at least address the Federal Reserve and the monopoly on money and the abuse of money, so many of the other things will solve itself. Because if they don't have the funding mechanism, they'll wither away and die. But
Right.
you got to kill it from the root. And the root is funding. The root is money. The root is I mean, it's not politics, it's fascism. It's government funding interests that fund their campaign. I mean, that's what we live in. That we live in a handshake between the giant corporations and the politicians. That's
Right.
fascism. Like, and you cut the money, you address that handshake dies very fast.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if you take the money out of the Federal Reserve in the government's hand, 90% of our fucking problems are over. They are obsolete. They are gone because there's no way to fund it. There's no way, like, not to say there wouldn't be turf wars over shit. Like, the wars aren't going to be over, but they won't be large scale wars because eventually they're going to run out of bullets. They're going to run out of money. You know what I mean? And it's going to be over because they don't have it. And this is why ending the Federal Reserve is the most important out of anything, because once you end the Fed, the rest falls into place. You end the wars, you end the empire, it is over. You put the money back in the people's hands, you get back on the gold standard where there's sound money. Like, dude, do you guys know, and I've talked about this in the past in my show, when the United States government was under the gold standard, they could not spend beyond their means or borrow beyond their means. It was impossible. The standard wouldn't allow it because there wasn't enough gold to back it up. Why the fuck do you think Richard Nixon in 1971 acts the gold standard? And why is it conveniently that the money printer went burr after that?
Well, I mean, I think everybody's heard of war bonds. That was a big
Yes.
thing in World War One, especially, is if the government wanted to go to war, they had to sell that literally, not
And they
just
asked
messaging.
permission from the people and sell them.
The people had to buy into that idea, and not just like mentally and agree to it. Oh yeah, I'll agree to a war overseas. They had to fund it directly out of their paychecks. That's what the gold standard like forced politicians to say, hey, you want to go to war overseas? Well, you're going to have to pay for it. And like, once that broke, and people are always like, oh, the gold standard was flawed because they can continue to devalue the dollar versus gold. But by devaluating the dollar versus gold, that was basically just a public announcement that we're fucking you over.
Yes.
That's what a devaluation was we're spending more and we're screwing you. And once that link was broken, they didn't have to publicly admit that anymore.
Right.
They didn't have to. I mean, it's all behind the scenes now. It's all Wizard of Oz. It's all behind the curtain. There's no transparency. I mean, outside of, their own admission of like, oh, CPI is like 3.5%. We're really working on getting that down, to 2. And it's like, no, in reality, you've lost 30% of your money in 4 years. They stole 30% of your money, of your paycheck. They stole it. And what did they do it for? To get them reelected and to kill innocent people halfway around the world,
Yes.
to get them reelected. It's
Yeah.
a money laundering scheme, and they're using your money to do it. And that's what inflation is they're stealing from you. And it's just, it sucks that we have to potentially get to the level of Argentina where it's 100% inflation for the populace to raise up and to say no more. And I think it's going to take that level of hurt for the American populace to say, no, we're not funding this anymore. And that
That
sucks, because it's going to destroy millions of lives. And you want to see the homeless populations in New York, in LA. That's, to your point earlier, that's coming to a city near you. These are people who are going to be living on the streets because they can't afford a house, they can't afford rent. The job doesn't pay them enough to just meet their bare necessities. And that's going to become big. And that's the thing, is like, it sucks that it has to get that bad for people to wake up.
it's actually heartbreaking. I've been screaming about this shit for like 4 years now, dude. Like COVID radicalized me. I've been on social media, like making everyone angry for the past 4 years, and they think I'm a fucking lunatic or whatever it may be. But here I am just sounding the alarms. I'm like, hey, this is going to happen and this is happening. And there's only been a couple things I've been wrong about. Seriously. Honestly, there's only been a couple things I have been wrong, but it's only been a couple things. Okay.
Well, you look back at Ron Paul. I mean, everything he was predicting has come true. He didn't get the timing right, but he for sure got the predictions right.
And guess why he had them right? I'm going to tell y'all why he had them right. Austrian economics. The Austrians have been calling, the Austrian economists have called every single bust since the inception of the Federal Reserve. They called all of it, every single one. And what they're calling for, what's coming up soon, is catastrophic, you guys. It is catastrophic what the Austrian economists are saying right now. And they haven't been wrong yet. Ron
It's
Paul.
cause and effect. It's basic economics, cause and effect, supply and demand. It's not crazy or like advanced for people to understand. I mean, I finally watched The Big Short, the movie, a couple weeks ago. And it's crazy because it really makes it real, and which is weird and scary, the fact that like it was put on screen and people, it was easy to understand what happened, and people are still clamoring for it to happen again. Even watching a dumbed down version on, from Hollywood, and they're like, oh no, we need government subsidized mortgages, and we need, like, holy shit, dude, this is exactly what got us into 2008. That's not that long ago. And they're like, we need to do that again. I just, it just, I don't know. It just, sometimes it makes you kind of like depressed on the human race in general, like how short our memory is and how we are so or avoiding like consequences, and avoiding like accepting our own behavior and our own actions. Like if people, really are, whether it's, non-believers, but I mean, the Bible spells it out. We are born sinful.
Right.
And that's humanity. We are born broken and wrong. That's our default,
Absolutely.
is to avoid responsibility, to avoid like having to own up to our own actions, And that's government in in a nutshell. Is it's not my fault, it's their fault. Oh, it's not their fault, it's their fault. It's not their fault. And so then you end up with a dictator
Right.
because everybody wants to avoid that responsibility, and then they can just put it on one person, whether it's a king or a dictator, and then you have World War III. And this, that's, I hate to go in a tangent with religion, but so much of where we are is because we're not, religion in the United States has died. And you can look at Great Britain, especially,
Right.
um, and look at like religion and the end of the empire. And you can see how much like atheists started taking off and the empire died is because, if you're born, if you think that, you're the most supreme being and everything starts and stops with you because you're perfect, and that level of nihilism and sociopath is, I mean, it's insane.
Well, I mean, and that's the world we live in. But like, I've said this before on the show, like America wanted a godless society and now they got it. And now they're reaping what they sow. And it's unfortunate that some of us have to deal with it because none of us, a lot of us, not none of us, but a lot of us didn't ask for this. You know,
Well, I think we're baked in to having a god. Um, maybe the god is you. Maybe the god is government for you. Maybe the god is atheism for you. I mean, everybody worships something. Everybody worships something. I have met some devout atheists, and they are devout because they worship atheism. And it doesn't matter whether you are a believer or a non-believer, you will worship something.
right.
And that's where I think so much of cultural rot. And I remember what podcast I listened to. They were talking about like the subways in New York versus the subways, in Europe or like in Moscow, and they were just like the subways in Europe are so clean because they respect each other, because they all are following the same path. They have a purpose as a culture, and in New York they hate each other. And so if you hate each other, shitting on the sidewalk, who cares, right? I don't care anybody steps in my shit because I hate you. But if you love your brother, you're not going to shit in the sidewalk, so they have to step in it. So it's so driven by culture,
Right.
and that's the kind of the outcome of like divide and conquer, and that's what we're reaping, what we sow, especially at a government level. Is it's it only gets worse if you constantly, it's us versus them.
And that's where we're at right now. It's not red versus blue. It's us versus them. And most people don't see it. They'd rather, worship Trump or worship Biden. Like government's a cult. Statism is a cult for real. Uh,
100%.
especially, in today's day and age, you know. But the fact of the matter is there is a way out of this. But we do have to find people with the same mindsets, whether they're on your team or not, and focus on those things. And also, you have to start owning things. You have to have assets. And if you don't have a lot of money, you find one of your homies that doesn't have a lot of money and put something on paper, that way, it's legal or whatever it may be, and go in on something, go on a piece of go in on a piece of property, go in on some gold. I know gold's not, attainable for a lot of people. Gold's like 20.
Silver is.
Silver's like $28 and some change an ounce. Gold is like 23.50 an ounce right now. I know that's hard for a lot of people, but they're
Well,
great investments. They're
well,
great investments.
everybody that's listening, I want you to look at your retirement fund, your 401k, your 403b, your Roth IRA, whatever it is, because the default allocation to those funds is company and government debt. It's not assets, it's debt. You're buying others' debt. And that's not going to benefit you because they can always default on that debt.
Right.
So and that's difficult. I mean, I even with my 401k through work, like I had to fight tooth and nail just to get access to half of my account.
Yeah, didn't you get bent over on some of your retirement?
I could only get access to half of my account, which I was able to invest in assets myself. The other half was forced into one of the pre-made plans, which is basically government and company debt.
Right.
And there was a day where with your 401k or 401(k), but you could borrow against it, or you could sell it. I mean, if you sold it, you pay a half very
You get hit with a capital
significant,
gain, they'll hit you
right,
hard. Yeah.
significant tax, right? But at least you could. At least with my plan, I can't borrow against it, and I can't touch that money. I can't sell it. It's not even mine anymore. And I would
Which is
be
crazy. That's your money. That's your money. You put your money into it and you can't access it.
can't
Say
touch it.
louder
And
for the people in the back.
people need to wake up to that. That's one of the biggest things I think that we could, we can make an impact is to say, I'm not investing into the default of government and company debt. I'm not doing that. Like I will either, I'm not going to participate in my company's 401k. And that sucks because there's, you lose out on the match. But if you can't touch it, if you can't borrow against it, it's not yours.
No.
It's the holder of the fund. It's theirs. It may be in your name, but it's not yours. And so at the very least, see if you can redirect at least some of your funds. And if you can't even do that, don't fund your account. Take that money and go buy real assets. And that's the only way we stop participating in the system, because the system is built up to support inflation. And how the government hides inflation is in the stock market. And so by our retirement funds, I think is over half of what is fueling the stock market. And that's all just debt. It's not assets, it's debt. So by you funding your retirement account, you're funding killing children overseas by the way of a bank or investment company funding a bank, which is buying government treasuries and bonds. And then the government, it's a Ponzi scheme that if any of us tried to do on our own, we'd be locked up for life.
Oh God. You might be lucky if they keep you alive. I mean, shit, if you do some shit like that. But like, here's the catch. You guys, get yourself some gold, get yourself some silver. Get yourself some precious metals. It's accumulating wealth. And by the way, you can also, and I'm not getting paid for this. These people don't know I'm saying this, but you can go through Noble Gold and start yourself an IRA. There are IRAs you can start or do, and they're actually very knowledgeable and very patient with people who are uninformed about stuff and they're just getting into it. They're great.
Well, there's also companies like Monetary Metals where you can actually send them your precious metals and then you can borrow against it. And they will pay you interest on it. And so that's the kind of stuff like let your actual wealth make you more money. I mean, there's a catch-22. I wouldn't recommend anybody just take your entire, safe in your home and send all money or precious metals to a third party,
right.
because who knows, what the government is to score. Oh, we're just going to seize all of these companies' assets. I mean, that's always a risk, right? So there is, you want to hold physical assets in your possession, at least a portion of it. But there are ways to make money on gold and silver, platinum. Copper's doing huge right now. Like I remember
Copper
I
just went
bought
up
some.
big time. I can't remember the percentage, but that was another thing that Gold Telegraph has been great, man. Especially lately, they've been on fire. You guys can follow them on Twitter, please, or X, whatever you want to call it. Like they're great, great source of information, and they know their shit. But like, yeah, copper's up big time.
Yeah, I bought 1 ounce copper rounds years ago for like pennies. And granted, that's what pennies used to be, as actual copper. And I've at least doubled my investment on those copper rounds.
Nice.
And silver is one of those things, like, it is so out of whack with what gold has done, that silver is so undervalued right now. It's only a matter of time before it catches up to gold. So if you can get silver for less than $30 an ounce, that's not, it's not going to break your bank. Like, you can
No,
accumulate
and
a couple
actually,
ounces of silver every week or every month.
silver's outperforming gold by like 3 times, really, in theory. Like, silver's gone up 3 times.
But it's achievable. Like, again, I
For
love
now.
the Canadian, silver 1 ounce rounds, because they're actually cheaper than the US mint versions, and obviously in Michigan it's the same. And so, make sure it's reputable. Don't be buying silver from some junk dealer in Asia or something like that, because it's probably plated. It's not actual silver, but
Pawn
make
shop.
sure you're getting it from some place that's reputable. But like people need to understand, like, unless you hold actual assets, you're gonna get fucked.
Yeah, and they're not going to spit on it before they do it. They're just going to take you for everything. Not to get too graphic, but that's just the way it is, man. But Ben, my dude, we got to close this shit up. We've been doing this for a while, man, but thank you for your time. How can we find you?
So right now I haven't been doing a whole bunch of podcasts on my own. My podcast is the State 180. Still debatable whether I can, divulge a lot more time to that, just because of everything that I've got going on in the Libertarian Party and just in life in general. But yeah, if you're interested in joining the Libertarian Party, like, I'd love to be able to plug you in and get you to some place that you are passionate about, whether you want to run for office, or maybe you just want to run for, a local position on your downtown development authority, or your, village council. Like, that's where we can make an impact. And that's where I'm passionate about, because if where you live can say fuck you to the state, and if you have a voice in that decision, I want you at that table. I want you a seat at that table. And so that's where we have an opportunity to push back against authoritarianism, is locally. So if you want to learn more about that, it's not as hard as people think. Sometimes it's just a matter of just sending an email to your village council president or chair or something like that. Like, and maybe it's just one meeting a month, and that one meeting can make a difference in a local business or regulation. That's where I'm passionate. So you can always reach me out. Twitter, it's picture this 1979. But feel free to shoot me an email at ben.dejong, DEJONG, at me.com. And I'd love to work with you and help you make an impact, especially in your local area.
Speaking of local stuff, we're going to give a shout out to my homeboy, Trevor Stepp, man. He just told me he's going to be running for, I believe, a trustee.
Yep.
And here in one of our local towns in Michigan. So Trevor, what up, dude? I hope you kick ass, man. But as for me, you can find me. All my handles are BudsnReality, BUDS letter N reality, BudsnReality. I actually started a Patreon, so for $3 a month, we are doing something where, with the Liberty Book Club, actually, it's going to be very Austrian economics driven. So I will pick an Austrian economist, one per month, and we're going to read their book, and we're going to do a live show and discuss the book. It's pretty cool. $3 a month. I'm pretty sure everybody can afford that, I hope. If not, I'm sorry. Ooh, I know time.
I'm signing up as soon as we get done with the podcast, so I can't wait.
And also, if you believe in my work and what I'm doing, please help keep the show going. CashApp, BudsnReality, same as everything else. All the handles are the same. Oh, by the way, I got a TikTok. You can follow me there too. It'll only
While it lasts.
What was that?
While it lasts.
Well, yeah, or until the feds kick my door in, one or the other. Because my wife was like, "You can't get arrested because of this." she started that, she started the tic tac. But if you believe in what I'm doing, please, help the show out and whatever. And until next time, peace, love, and liberty. Y'all be good.